This is Sporting Life.
Well, welcome along to the latest Sporting Life Racing podcast. David Orr, joined by Ben Linfoot, Billy Nash, David Johnson and Graham Cunningham. We'll hear midway through the show too from the freshly retired Daryl Jacob about his new life, his previous career. One or two cracking stories. Stay around for one involving Paul Nicholls, which is a belter in particular. But new year, new podcast, GC. Game notes. How are you feeling heading into this first episode of 2025?
Relieved, Dave. Hello, everyone. Just went outside to get a couple of things and nearly went arse over tit on the ice. So that's a result. Anyway, I'm feeling, I kind of like these game notes today, mainly because for the first time in history, I almost got through the entire thing without mentioning the name of a single horse, which takes a bit of doing. So let's give it a go. Happy New Year, everyone. A plain start for me. Lost a few quid punting. Musselburgh and back on a Hogmanay fool's errand. Pondered taking a break from it all. Then looked at the miserable real news and how racing news still tickles me and thought, bollocks, I'm all in again. So here goes. Inspection embarrassments. A tale as old as time. Lessons will be learned. Blah, blah, blah. Spoiler alert, they won't. JP and Dem boys making Darren Yates an offer he couldn't refuse for the new Lion. Darren tells Lucky the price rests on what TNL achieves from now on. Yates man calls it a bonus, a nice kicker. Nice deal, Daz. Just wondering, any kicker for Dan? Dave Ord, very chummy again with Binny, Cal and Bren on Wade In. Getting boffo reviews. Bearded Scribe, what next? Guest slot in the racing room? If so, maybe swerve the Stuart Hogg intros? Big Tone and Dem Racing Room boys. Riding this Rory Campbell footy punting syndicate saga really hard. Raw deal for the lads who invested. No sign of this Rory youth. And hard to reset the P&L on this one. Lastly, Dave, put this straight on the poll. Longest, weirdest farewell tour. Is it A, Funtime Frankie D, B, Sir Robert Cooper, C, Derek Tomo Thompson? My money's on Tomo, but maybe it's a photo. Dave, those are the concise New Year game notes.
Thank you, JC. And I will get the poll live as soon as possible. I think from a video message on the artist following Andrew's Twitter yesterday secures his status on for the farewell tour. With lots of miles left to run in that one. David, lots of miles to run in late abandonments in what's going on with the weather at present. Last Saturday, blank ITV screens. 2 meetings took place, nothing moved. Was this a disgrace job?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. Sometimes you'll put a tweet up and it's like nobody seems to take any interest in it. Whereas I put something up on Saturday morning and it sort of seemed to get quite a few retweets and likes and comments on it straight away. And it was just pointing out about whether moving all the flat stuff out of the afternoon session to make way for premierisation leaves British racing, overly exposed to the elements at this time of year, because that's exactly what ended up transpiring, wasn't it? I don't think anybody necessarily expected both Wincanton and Sandown to go quite in the manner that it did. So I think you want to be very careful about being overly wise after the event. But I think it is one of those things that we need to look at and say, well, is it a case of needing the all-weather stuff as that backup? And that certainly seems to be the views expressed by ITV, who obviously ended up with a blank screen all afternoon.
And one thing that struck me, they seemed all in on the inspection news on Wednesday and Thursday from Sandown and Wincanton. There didn't seem to be any contingency plan. Once that they thought one of those would race, that was it. Do you think there needs to be more flexibility than that?
It's difficult, isn't it? It's a difficult situation in terms of I don't think we should limit Park of the courses in terms of timeframes and things like that. I think they've got to have all that leeway to make decisions. I know it's frustrating when they're made so late, etc. And I think it's a really difficult job being a clerk of the course. Contingency plans are different, aren't they? And I do think we probably should expand on what DJ's saying, and the continued evolution of the all-weather program is probably key for me in this debate, because we've seen it over the last 5-10 years. It's been fantastic in terms of how the all-weather finals have developed and everything, but it's all seemed lopsided to me towards the end of the winter season. And I do think it probably needs to be bolstered in the middle when the weather is at its worst. And even if Newcastle or whatever was between 2 and 4 on Saturday, it wasn't a great card, was it? And I do think we need to be looking at having better all-weather racing in the deep winter months. You know, a decent Class 2 handicap that you can sort of hang your hat on a racing when there's a completely blank jump Saturday. It's difficult to predict when and where these are going to happen, but I think, you know, looking at January, that's 1 month where you want your better all-weather racing bolstered going into a weekend. And weather patterns are changing, aren't they, as well? It's another thing to consider. It's very different now than what it used to be. You look at Cheltenham festivals, with the soft ground Cheltenham festivals we're having, etc. So all these things have got to be put into the mixer and discussed. But yeah, for me, look, you know, let's not look too negative. It's difficult being a clerk of the course. Let's look at something we can do proactive. And I think looking at that all-weather programme is something I would concentrate on.
I think that's why the old Lingfield slots used to work so well, because they regularly would have a couple of 0 to 100 handicaps, wouldn't they, on a Saturday afternoon? And then if it was the worst case scenario that the turf racing was abandoned, they'd just slip in there. And I think one of the real interesting things, I don't know if anybody heard Brant Dunshee on the Nick Luck podcast, he was saying now, if they're going to make contingencies, it's that 72-hour slot, which is the most important. Well, 72 hours ahead of last Saturday was New Year's Day. So I don't know if somebody was a little bit too late at the party the night before that didn't manage to get into the office on time or what. So
good point. We're getting slightly off the question, lads, though. The question was it a disgrace job? And there were definite elements of that. I found my John Candy, Steve Martin, planes, trains and automobiles trips to Musselburgh quite informative, and it's helped sort of shape my thinking on this. Have you ever heard of that phrase, the definition of a committee is 3 people, 2 of whom are absent? And I think we need to head in that direction now. I'm fairly tired of seeing like 15 or 20 people poking sticks and what have you. Give those people, trainers or jockeys, whatever, carte blanche to withdraw if they don't think it's safe for their horse, and trust the decision in timely manner, not 6, 7, 10 minutes before the first race, to one expert. That could be the clerk of the course, it could be a course inspector, it could be a steward. But I think you have to find down the number of people involved in this process. For example, I'm told on good authority that one jockey who was walking the course half an hour before the first race at Musselburgh said to a key executive, "You've got lucky, you've got away with it here." Then he went into the steward's room and said, "Yeah, it's 20% frozen." What do you do with that? You know, what do you do with those mixed messages? It's counterproductive to a real positive decision. So I'd be inclined now to try and set a 2-hour cutoff point, and having one person be absolutely key and nominated in that decision, because it's become such a cast of dozens having all their input, and you're bound to get conflicting views on a system like that.
The one thing that struck me in Ireland is that it's very quick and proactive in rearranging meetings and races. If a fixture goes, you soon very quickly learn, is it going to be rescheduled in its entirety, races being moved. HMI do seem very proactive in that element of it.
I don't understand how they can't do it in Britain. I see something similar happen in the States during the week, where a meeting had to be abandoned at one of the bigger tracks on the west coast of America, and they just moved the entire meeting to, you know, from the Saturday to the Wednesday or whatever. I don't understand how that doesn't happen more often in Britain. Yes, we have less racing in Ireland, so it's easier to do it over here. But yeah, your point is, like, we lost Cork last Saturday. It's already been refixed for next week. Clonmel was supposed to race tomorrow. That's not going to happen, but it will that meeting has been put on for next week again. So, yeah, it's a system that seems to work well over here. Like I said, I don't understand how they don't do something similar in Britain, or at least don't do more of it in Britain.
I think that's
Well,
the
you did.
clearest point about how much racing that there is in Britain, that you don't actually need to, because there are other opportunities. And maybe, we're sort of seeing with some of the turnover statistics, when there's only been this one meeting, there's such huge demand for just this one meeting that, there's so much betting on it. So I think, it just sort of does show that the bloated fixture list is another reason why it just isn't really necessary to reschedule the meetings in the same way in the UK as what it is in Ireland.
The one thing you did do well in Ireland last week, you got Nick's Cad at Naas on Sunday. We saw some significant performances. We'll start with two from the Mullins team. Fun in the Mare's Beginner's Chase. She got quotes for the Mare's Chase at Cheltenham off the back of it. My gut feeling is that might be a season too soon for her to be going down that route. What do you make of the performance, and what do you make of her as a project?
Performance was quite good. She seemed to take quite well to fences. Now, she got an easy enough time with things in front, but for the most part, she jumped quite well. And to be honest, she had that race in the bag a long way out, I thought. And she won easily, but I take your point. I mean, she ran to a time form rating there of 138 with a P. Even in her own stable, that wouldn't come anywhere close to being good enough to win a Mare's Chase. For example, Allegory de Vassy won the Grade 3 at Fairyhouse on New Year's Day, and she ran to a time form rating of 151p. Dino Blue will be above that again. So I can see where people are coming from with fun. But like you, I'm not even sure she'd go for that race this year. And if she does, she'll have plenty to find. The other, I suppose, big Mullins performance on the day was Il Atlantique, a horse who we've spoken about on a number of occasions on this podcast. And he has made a very bright start to his chasing career. I mean, he won his beginner's chase at Navan first time up over 2.5. The drop back to 2 miles really seemed to suit him here at Naas the other day. And he was very impressive. He's got quotes of, I think he's possibly as low as 8-1 in a place now for the Arkle. I think that's the right race to run him in. But I do think soft ground is probably important to him. I think his best performances have come when the mud has been flying. If it turns up really soft at Cheltenham, he'll have a big chance. But, again, on the figures, he doesn't have that much to find on time form figures with Sergino. He ran to 155p. Sergino's 159 large P. But again, I suppose Sergino, unexposed horse, you'd imagine there's plenty more to come from him. So 8-1 looks about the right price for Atlantique. I certainly wouldn't put anyone off him each way. And he's, like I said, he is going to win a big race over fences. I think it may not be the Arkle, but if it comes up soft, then he'll give everyone a good run for their money,
Lawlers of Naas. I'm heading there myself very shortly. The hotel, not the race. He didn't win. Jasmine Devoe fluffed his lines on a couple of hurdles along the way, but the yellow clay did, and he looks a rock solid Cheltenham Festival prospect for Gordon Elliott.
Is a rock solid Cheltenham Festival prospect. The question is, which race will he run in, Dave? Gordon Elliott seems to be pretty adamant that he's going to go for the Ballymore. Personally, I'd love to see him in the Albert Bartlett. I think he's a proper stayer, this horse, and I'd just be a little bit concerned about him come Cheltenham. If the ground is dry at Cheltenham, 2 miles and 5, he just might lack a gear against something with a bit of pace. Now, he's done nothing wrong over hurdles. He's 4 from 4. He was impressive at the weekend. He won nicely, but again, it was 2.5 miles on heavy ground. His stable companion Wingman was in the race and went a really decent gallop. It was a well-run race. It was a proper test of stamina, and the yellow clay saw it out better than anything else. I'd love to see him going 3 miles at Cheltenham. I'm not sure that'll happen. But again, I think he's second on the time form list of novice hurdlers this season. Elliott is also responsible for the top on the list, which is Romeo Coolio, who obviously won the 2 mile grade 1 at Leopardstown over Christmas. Again, he's the horse I'd like to see run over 2.5. I think I'm not sure he's quite quick enough for a Supreme. So we'll see how this develops over the year. But either way, Gordon does seem to have a nice bunch of novice hurdlers at his disposal this year. Going back to Jasmine Devoe, it's back to the drawing board, or should I say back to the schooling ground with him, because again, his jumping was leaden-footed, to say the least. There was touches of the Ahoy Seniors about him at the weekend. So Willie's got his work cut out with him, I think.
One thing, Willie, I think the crisis, the first day of the Leopardstown Christmas, the yard bring out of form. They seem to be running okay again now ahead of the DRF, which I think will be a much better gauge as to where some of those big guns are for the spring. Battling foot, you can't move for roads to Cheltenham at the minute, and you can't move all of a sudden for the straight to Cheltenham messages. They're beginning to build up, aren't they? The direct route. The refreshing season that we've been having of big horses, big clashes, might be drying up for the next few months.
might be, but I think we're sort of used to this now. I think GC might clash with me here, but it's not like the good old days anymore, Dave. It's different now, and you look at the schedule for these horses. It's end of January, early February. You've got Trials Day, DRF, maybe Newbury the week after. But apart from that, there's not a lot for them to go at, is there? And if you haven't got a horse whose program fits in with that sort of end of January, early February, I find it perfectly understandable. There's only 9 weeks to Cheltenham now. So it doesn't bother me as much as it used to, this old Straight to Cheltenham after Christmas thing. Maybe that's because the programme's so heavy topped towards a spring programme now. You've got Cheltenham, Aintree, Punchestown, all of that. But I don't know, maybe it's just years and years of it, but I'm used to it.
Do you see you?
I'm used to it. It doesn't mean I like it. And on the day that Nigel Twiston Davis stable wins a good grade one on Boxing Day, the Formby Novice Circuit with Potter's Jarm, and immediately says Straight to Cheltenham, you sort of go, the game's up. And it's not just him, it's Ben Pauling with the Jukebox Man, various, good quality Irish horses. The point I would make is that it denudes January and February of a lot of interest for racing fans. That's point one. Owners and trainers probably not right fussed about that. Point two, I think a lot of evidence, both in Britain and especially at the DRF, tells you that a run in good quality company during February or late January does not impact adversely on the chance of a horse at the Cheltenham Festival. And perhaps significantly again, trainers and especially owners might not be bothered about this in the slightest. But have a look at Ballyburn and Slade Steel, for example. They dominated that Grade 1 novice hurdle at the DRF. Ballyburn went on to win the 2 mile 5 novice hurdle at Cheltenham, and Slade Steel won the Supreme Novices. And they won, respectively, less money by winning at Cheltenham than Ballyburn did by winning at Leopardstown, or Slade Steel would have done by winning at Leopardstown. So for those 3 reasons, I think they're fairly persuasive reasons myself. I think it's a real retrograde development, but we're going to hear it more and more over the next few weeks, I think.
I think one of the problems, I was just going to say one of the problems is the horses that we're on about, the likes of Jukebox Man, Potter's Charm, the New Lion, they're all Grade 1 winners at the moment. And if they don't go straight to Cheltenham, it probably means that in their trial, they're going to have to go and give weight to something else, which you can sort of see why Connections are opting that they don't particularly want to do that. So if we're going to moan about these horses that aren't going to run, we've got to say, well, to the BHA, well, can you give these horses the opportunities? Yes, they could go and take on the Irish in the DRF, but again, it's not really that appealing. So hopefully, we'll see like this meeting at Windsor and Ascot that has been strengthened up and that they're throwing lots of money at. Can they sort of get those races graded status and really actually tempt these trainers to really have a go in January and February rather than just wait for March and April?
And in the Twister defence, Potter's Charm did have 4 runs up to and including Boxing Day, so it's not like he's gone bang bang layaway.
I did think the Jukebox Man was one of them might want a bit more match practice with. I don't think you can have too much experience kind of going into a festival over fences, but we shall see what happens from that. Now, GC, we saw the Cheltenham entries come through yesterday, feverishly awaiting them at 12 o'clock, hitting refresh on the computer. First, the headline act, 5 British entries in the Gold Cup. First of all, you shrug your shoulders, throw your hands in the air, and then you look at what's actually missing. And it wasn't a division where we were ever going to suddenly find 12 or 14 to run in it.
It's not a big story because nothing's missing that you would really want there. So that's the deal. It's Galopin de Champ, it's Factor File, it's Jerry Colombe, and it's big prices bar the rest. So let's hope we see Galopin and Factor File at Leopardstown. Jerry Colombe apparently might come to Windsor next weekend, all going well, which is good. Good to see trainers, casting the net a little wider for different races than are normally targeted. But no, Britain, for a while now has not had any depth in the staying chase division. Some people, you could say, take out in the staying division there, and that sentence still makes perfect sense. But the main point to mention is that we really need Galopin Des Champs to stay healthy and on top form and Factor File. Otherwise, if a Henderson incident occurred, and we should not discount the fact that strange things can happen with yards, then the Gold Cup would start to be looking a little thin, wouldn't it?
For the British team, the Green Shoots have recovered. They're among the younger horses, aren't they? Which it would be the favourites for the Triumph, the Turners, the good novice chasers. There's hope in the younger generation. Arkle, yeah, there's plenty of hope coming. Look at Billy; he's worried. He can see Phil Tufnell with that trophy on the stand at the final day of Cheltenham. Billy, I'll come to you about the Ryanair, because famously a race that people. I think Ted Walsh said nobody ever read a horse hoping it would win a Ryanair, but there's plenty.
Stayers Hurdle, I think.
Oh, well, there you go. I'll change it to the Ryanair. It wasn't Ted Walsh, but I'll say. But all of a sudden, there's a flurry of big names in there, obviously given the options from Gold Cups and from the Champion Chase. It could make for an intriguing Ryanair this year.
He could. I suppose one of the intriguing ones is Spillane Tower, who hasn't been given a Gold Cup entry. Whether he'll turn up in the Ryanair or not, I'm not too surprised about that, to be honest. I did think this was possibly the right option for him, especially when JP has Factor File and others for the Gold Cup. The other notable absence from the Ryanair is Elete Tomp, who is not either in the Ryanair or the Champion Chase. Unfortunately, he's not going to make the festival by the looks of things. But it could be a fascinating race. And I suppose the fact that you have a High Senior and Grey Dawning in the race as well as in the Gold Cup leads to the possibility where it's not beyond the realms of possibility where there'll be no British trained runner in the Cheltenham Gold Cup this year. If the two of them come to the Ryanair, you've only got Long Press, Royal Pagaille and the Real Whacker representing Britain in the Cheltenham Gold Cup.
Look at him, he was trying to suppress the smile, and it just broke out towards the end.
I would love it if one of them won it now. Love it, as Kevin Keegan once. Ben Linfoot, you were very anti-Brexit. You were tipping Ile Francais for the King George. I laughed at you. I was nearly spectacularly wrong down the straight at Kempton. He's in all three for France. They can't make their mind up. If you had the choice, if you had the Euros to throw at it, where would Ile Francais be running for Ben Linfoot?
I think the Ryanair's the obvious race for him, isn't it? 2 mile 5, going around there on the front end. Looks tailor-made for him. I'm not sure about dropping right back to 2 miles. I know a few people have sort of said that for him in recent days. It doesn't look an obvious play for me. I think definitely Ryanair for Ile Francais. But like you say, he's got all three options, so I'm sure they'll look at the ground and all of that and see where's best to run him. I thought it was interesting that JP only has the 2 entries in the Gold Cup. Factor File and Corbett's Cross, he could have had 4 or 5, you think. And, obviously Factor File's is number 1, but Corbett's Cross, I thought he ran okay in the King George. I wouldn't rule him out of a big run in the Gold Cup each way. And you see his National Hunt Chase form being franked by Embassy Gardens. And I look at that 33-1, and I am tempted by Corbett's Cross, especially if we've got a soft ground Gold Cup.
Good stuff. And John Bond, favourite, of course, Billy, for the Champion Chase. He's among a big field for that. Right, I'm just going to break away from the regular panel for a short while. I caught up, as I mentioned at the start, with Daryl Jacob on Tuesday to speak to him about retired life, his career, and 1 or 2 other nuggets. And anyway, over to you, Daryl.
This is Sporting Life.
Daryl, we're just over a week into the retirement, which we'll touch upon later. But first of all, that moment when you crossed the line on Impere Pass, what was going through your mind?
Yeah, it was a bit surreal, really, Audie, because I at Leopardstown the day before, I unfortunately, one of Simon and Isaac's horses suffered a fatal injury whenever I was riding quite early doors, and I don't know, something just kind of clicked in my brain that time. I just didn't get a lot of satisfaction out of injuring one of Simon and Isaac's horses. I've been associated for them for such a long time, and I remember after racing that day, I spoke to Dad, and I just said to him, I said, that upset me quite a bit. And I went home that night, and I thought about it quite a lot, because obviously I was riding Impere Pass the next day, and he obviously had a grade 1 opportunity there for him to go and win. And I said to Dad, I said, this might be, a fitting end to a wonderful career if this horse managed to win a grade 1. And I just couldn't get out of my head all night long. I didn't sleep very much. And when I went out and I rode him and I crossed the line, it just felt right. It really did. And I can't really explain how it came about, or obviously I was thinking about it the night before, but whenever I crossed the line, it was just one of those moments where I just kind of, when I pulled up and I crossed the line, thought, yeah, do you know what? I'm happy with everything I've achieved now. I've ridden over 1,000 winners. I've got the grade one that I badly, badly wanted this year. And I just thought it would be, with Leopardstown, going back to Leopardstown the next day, I just thought it would have been a fitting end to a wonderful career for me. And yeah, so it kind of came as a bit of a shock to everybody.
It really did. What was your reaction from your wife and kids? Were they relieved? Were they pleased? How did they respond?
Well, if you want the truth, Kelly was very, very mad at me because I said, obviously, 12 hours later, that was going to be my final ride at Leopardstown. And she's obviously in England and she had to get the kids and all that organised to come over because they wanted to be there for me for my final ride. So for 12 hours, she was very, very stressed. And but look, when it was all happened, she enjoyed the day. The kids really, really enjoyed the day. And Leopardstown made it a great send-off for me. And I'll be forever grateful for that. And but yeah, she seems happy and she seems content that we've had a long, illustrious career, and it's nice that to finish it that way.
And how different's life now? Your daily routine. I know you're barely settling into it, but how are you finding it without that daily call to the racecourse?
Very different. But like I say, I've probably been getting used to it a little bit because obviously with the injuries and stuff like that I've had over the last kind of 6 or 7 months. But yeah, it's a different sort of feeling. I've got to get up and I've got to try and go to work now because riding racehorses for the last 24 years, that's never ever classed that as being work. That was enjoyment, and I got a huge amount of satisfaction out of it. So at the moment, I'm just trying to settle in and try and get a few contacts. And I love going to work. I love getting up in the morning. I love having a routine. And please God, it won't be too long before I find that routine where I'll be getting out and doing a bit every day of the week.
Plenty of jockeys, as soon as they retire, say, that's it, I'll never ride another horse. What about you? Will you keep your eye in? Will you ride work? Will you school?
Yeah, funny enough, actually, I was riding out there this morning. I was helping Nick Schofield. I went into Paul Nichols's the other morning and Harry Durham's the other morning. I'm going to do a little bit with Harry Durham throughout the winter time. And obviously Simon and Isaac's, they've got a lot of horses in Ireland. I'm popping into Nigel Twiston Davis in the morning. And, I'll be over in Ireland at least once a month sitting on a lot of Simon's horses. So I still want to keep very fit. I still want to keep active. And still want to help Double Green get better and better. And, and any help that I can help JJ along the way will, I'm sure it's only going to stand us in really good stead.
And what do you think about the appointment of JJ? Do you feel he was the right man to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, most definitely, because I think JJ is a wonderful rider and always has been a wonderful rider. He's a very, very good horseman. He's very, very sympathetic with the horses that he rides. And he's just got a lovely way of going about himself. And, he's no stranger to riding winners for Double Green. Obviously, when I was injured last year, he deputised for Intense Raffle and won the Irish National on Intense Raffles. He had a great Christmas period after having a bit of an injury, a setback that he's had. But JJ's a wonderful rider and he's going to be a huge part of Double Green. And, we're all very, very much looking forward to welcoming him on board.
And just in your life now, I'd imagine the first thing that must change is diet. I've lost count the number of times I've seen you running around race courses, trying to shed a pound or two before a ride. Has it changed? Is it a completely free for all now for you?
Well, yes and no, really. Whereas before I was sort of having one meal a day to try and keep me going, whereas now I can actually wake up and if I feel like having a coffee, I can have a coffee, or if I want breakfast, I can have breakfast. So yeah, it's obviously going to change. I'm obviously going to get heavier because I've battled with the scales for 23 years, and it's only going to take a little bit of time to try and find a different routine, a different way of going about my business. And I'm sure we'll settle into it quite well. But I'm definitely already I'm a good bit heavier than when I was at Leopardstown last week.
Let's look back a little bit now. Let's start. We talked about Simon and Isaac, what a huge influence they were. Robert Olner in those early days, how important was that relationship?
Oh, massively. For sure, I wouldn't have achieved anything like the career that I've had if it wasn't for the boss. I mean, he's been instrumental in my career. Every decision that I have made ever since I came over here, he's made that decision, and we've talked about that decision even with Simon and Isaac. That was a conversation that me and the boss had about whether to join Simon and Isaac 11 years ago. you know, what the boss always wanted for me was that what's best for Daryl Jacob, the jockey, not what's best for anybody else, what's best for me. And like I say, he's like a father figure to me. And, you know, he's really kept me grounded. He's kept me working hard. He's kept me dedicated. And even after his injury, you know, I want to achieve something, and I wanted to keep him proud. I wanted him watching the racing every day and be proud of what I was achieving. So it made me work extra hard to achieve everything that I've achieved in this game.
Which is a huge amount through that career. But if you could go back and have one ride again, another go at one of those rides during the career, which one would it be and why?
Oh, I think it would definitely be. Look. I don't know what the result would be or whether the result would be any different, but I'd love to have a go on Scoriel in the champion chase again when I got badly hampered down the inner, going to 2 out. Put the kettle on, won their champion chase, but you know, I was a flying home at the end of it. And look, again, I don't know whether the result would be any different to what it actually was, but I'd definitely like another go of that one.
And another aspect, I'm presuming, of a jockey's life is rollickings between owners, trainers, whatever. Is there one that stands out to you that you remember from those years gone by?
Yeah, probably the biggest rollicking or the biggest argument that I've had was probably with actually Paul Nicholls at Ascot. It was the Saturday before we leave, the long walk hurdle day, and I rode a horse called Cedra Bleu, I think it was his name, and I actually thought I'd give him. I finished second on him, and Aidan Coleman won the race. I can't remember, on one of Venetia Williams's horses, and I promise you, I gave this horse an absolute peach. He was never a horse that wanted to win. I produced him at the right time to go and win his race, and he unfortunately didn't want to win. And I remember Paul came out and he met me at the course, and we absolutely tore stripes out of each other the whole way back in from the race course, back into the number 2nd spot. And in the end, I literally just walked away, went in, and I flung my saddle straight at the Valads. I hit my Valad Ginge. I hit him in the shoulder with my iron. And yeah, that was a fairly heated debate, that one was.
Let's talk about some happier memories, because there have been plenty. What are the days that stand out? Just 3 rides that you'll always remember.
3, I would definitely go. Probably the best day that I've really enjoyed the most was Lamy Serge when he won the French champion hurdle that day. An English horse, Nicky Henderson, going over there. I knew how talented Lamy Serge was. He was he'd won a few Grade 1 races, and I knew that day I was 2nd or 3rd on him in the sort of the French champion, the warm-up races, the Prix Le Barque, I think it was called. And I gave him a good ride that day, but I felt I was too handy on him that day to maximise his true kick at the end of the race. So I went out there and I rode him completely stone cold last, 30 lengths off the leader. Nicky Henderson was screaming at me from start to pretty much the last 50 yards what I was doing on the horse. But I just knew that day I had to be brave and I had to be bold. If I was going to get the best out of that horse, I really had to be brave and believe in the horse and believe in myself that day. And it worked to an absolute T, because 5 yards after the line, the horse had run its race. And I knew if I had produced him any earlier, he wouldn't have won. So that was a real kick winning that race. Obviously, Neptune Cologne winning the national, it's every jockey's dream to be involved in the race. But to go out there and actually win the Grand National itself, it's a very special day. And again, it's just something I'm very proud of, to win the Grand National. It's a race that I followed since I got into horse racing. So to win that race was very special. And definitely Bristol LeMay has got to go in there as well. When he won his 2nd Betfair Chase, Haydock crowd absolutely loved him. He loved Haydock. He was a wonderful horse for me the whole way through my career, winning, Grade 1s from a 3-year-old the whole way right up to the end of his career. But to beat Might Bite and Nate River, who were 1st and 2nd in the Gold Cup the previous year, people say he couldn't have won that race. But to go out there and beat them that day, and I'll never ever forget the reception that he got that day. It literally puts hairs stand up in the back of your neck.
Incredible day to even be to watch on, so to being part of it must have been something else. And Daryl, just say the phone rang at the beginning of March. You're going to come out of retirement for one ride at the Cheltenham Festival. You could take your pick. If you could ride one horse at Cheltenham in March this year, what would it be?
Oh, I think it'd have to be Galloping the Champs, wouldn't it? Trying to eliminate Best Mate, 3 Gold Cups. I mean, obviously, I know there's a few horses have done that before, but he looks to stand out. I thought he looked very, very good at Leopardstown over the Christmas period, right back to his very, very best. When some of Willie's horses probably weren't running to their absolute maximum that weekend, but I thought he was very, very impressive the way he went about his business there, and to beat Factor Foil the way he did. He looked at Punchestown, he looked very, very good, didn't he? But I thought that was very, very special performance there. Just I loved the way the last 100 yards he really, really powered to the line. So I think he'd be the one that I'd like to ride.
Daryl, the final question, just a political one at the minute. The late abandonments, inspections that we're seeing, how frustrating is it for a jockey to be sat in the weighing room not knowing what happens? And or what happens, because you pay your way there, you've got your travelling expenses, do you get compensated if there's abandonments? How does it work out?
No, obviously, because we're all self-employed. Some races courses have been very good at faking them, have been very, very good. Sometimes when they've called off the meeting, they've given all the jockeys a riding fee back to, for compensation for travel, because these race courses, they're a long way away. Sometimes, especially, some of the northern tracks, they're a long, long way away from us southern. And especially there's a lot of southern jockeys, southern trainers sending horses up to the north. Unfortunately, it's the weather. We can't really do anything about it. I mean, there's pros and there's cons to it. You call it off very early, and potentially, if you give it a little bit of time, potentially the thaw will come out and you could race. But then again, when it drags on, when you have a first inspection, then you have a second inspection, and then you have a third inspection, it just feels like as if you're going down that alleyway where you're kind of hoping, and more than anything else. And that can be a bit frustrating when you've got three planned schedules or whatever, and it, at the end of it, the third one, then they call it off. That can be very, very frustrating, because, like you say, you are pretty much there. I don't know how you're going to improve it. I don't know what way you could do with changing it, because we all want to race, we all want to ride, everyone wants to watch racing. And if you call it off at 8 o'clock and by 11:30 or 11 o'clock, it's perfectly raceable. You're missing a day's racing when you've got all the food there, you've got the catering there, you've got the staff there, you got everyone there, haven't you? And then to call it off at that time, it just feels it's wasted as well. But then when it drags on and drags on and drags on, that's when you get a little bit more like, it's tiring, especially if you've done all that sort of traveling to get there.
Yeah, there's no easy answer, is there, to that? But that's fantastic, Daryl. Thanks for your time. Great to hear from you, reflecting on the career, because it has been some career. The great news is you're not going to be lost to it. You'll be a regular across Sporting Life podcast all the way through to Cheltenham and Aintree and beyond. So, can I just take this opportunity on behalf of all our users and listeners to congratulations on a great career and bowing out as you did on the right note. Congratulations.
Thanks a million, mate. Cheers.
Well, cheers to Daryl. And as we said at the end there, we'll be seeing more of him in the build-up to Cheltenham through the rest of the jumps season. GC, one thing we need to touch on, the new Lion, favourite, another British favourite for the festival. I'm losing count of him at the minute. He's been the Turners Novices Hurdle. Change of ownership we discussed in the game notes. JP McManus, Silks. Now, what did you make of the story? Were you surprised, shocked at all?
Well, if you remember last week's podcast, I said he's going to have to, fight them off with a stick. The bids coming in, and it wasn't a surprise in any way when it was announced that he'd been sold. And I don't know about Darren Yates' financial position, but if you get an offer of, and I'm going to say $1 million, flat out, and then with the bonus and kickers that he talked about, if he wins at Cheltenham, I think as a bloke who's not, started with fortunes, he had his Frankie Dettori big win and has parlayed that in various ways. It's a mighty difficult offer to refuse, because I'm sure he's still going to be massively emotionally and financially invested in the future success of the new Lion. So I get it completely. Is it a good or a bad thing for the game as a whole? JP is unreal in his unstinting support at all levels. But if you have a look at the owners' table, there are people. Let's have a look. Guy Walters, the Gredley family, relatively new arrivals to the top table at jumping. Is it Phil Davis, the Venetia Williams chap, or Peter Davis? Either way, he's going well. Ronnie Bartlett, always, significant presence in big races. Johnny De La Haye, Munir and Swade, as we talked about. The Richies and Fergie and them boys. Gay Smith, Hemmings, etc. A real mixture of people who've been around the jump scene forever, and others who've made a significant impact more in recent years. So I don't think it's an unhealthy situation at the top table over jumps. The people with the most money will always have a very powerful chance of winning the biggest races. So I think it was a predictable storyline. And I suspect if you're Darren Yates, you're still thinking, yeah, I'm heavily invested in this horse because of the bonus, Dave, the kicker.
It's always the bonus, always the bonus. Scoot, in terms of owners who are going to buy a horse this way, private sale, in training high profit, it over jumps, it tends to be JP. John Ingles ran a piece on Spotlight about his big purchases in the past. Some have worked, some have less so. But the good news, they do stick with their original trainer, don't they, with JP? This isn't a favour to Skelton. That's been his modus operandi throughout.
It has, yeah, and like GC said, that's part of the support that McManus has given to the game, not just his bucket loads of money over the years, but remaining loyal to these trainers when he makes the purchases, and good to see the new Lion stay in the yard. It's a bit of a dream ticket, isn't it, for an owner, buying a horse for 50 grand over jumps and selling it for 1.5 million, whatever these telephone numbers. Do you think we could get a podder syndicate together and try and get one going?
Well, as you know, Scoop, my last venture with Ted Leal, we sold him overseas. I have got a track record in doing
Were we
this.
talking telephone numbers that day?
I'm not. I don't like my charity work, Scoop. I do not discuss my bloodstock
Were
numbers.
we talking kickers and bonuses?
There was no kicker. He did win Palestine's biggest race while he was out there. It was a match race, but he did win it. So I mean, whatever the Palestine equivalent of the Derby was, Tad Leal won it. So there you go.
He has been due a change of luck, hasn't he, Darren Yates? Because he's not been shy of putting his hand in his pocket, and it hasn't really worked out that well for him in the past, has it? So it does seem as though it's good that it's finally paid off for them.
Well, the kicker here was him suggesting that he wants to get out of the game. That seems the slightly perplexing element. You know, he's got Sherry Dam, who looks a real good quality chasing mare. Saw one at Warwick the other week, and grumbling about the way owners are treated. I get it, but one doesn't necessarily go with the other. I've just made a real score, selling a real good prospect for $1 million plus. That's it. I'm taking my ball home. Oh.
Maybe it's a chance to get out with most of the chips that he started with, rather than sort of realizing how deep he was into the game and wants to sort of just ride off into the sunset a little bit with some chips back in his pocket.
Yeah. Interesting character, interesting chap. Billy, so are you. Interesting character, interesting chap. This weekend in Ireland, we've got the Sky Bet Moscow Flyer at Punchestown. The lesser spotted Salvatore Mundi is one of 3 Willie Mullins entries in the race. He's now favourite for the Sky Bet Supreme, but it's 7's the field, which I think tells you where we are in that 2-mile novice hurdle division. I mean, what on earth do you make of him?
First things first, I think it looks pretty positive as regards racing going ahead in Ireland this weekend. I think we're certainly Saturday and Sunday don't seem to be in any doubt at the moment, touch wood. So yeah, Sunday's card at Punchestown looks very interesting. That Moscow Flyer is a race that Willie has targeted for his better novice hurdlers down through the years. He always kind of holds one back for this race. And it would appear that Salvatore Mundi is one that he's aiming at it this year. We didn't see him over Christmas when we expected to, but he's got other options in the race. He's got Ballygunner Castle, he's got Kelly Stoir, a couple of recent maiden hurdle winners who are certainly capable of making an impact at this sort of level. But Salvatore Mundi is the really interesting one, obviously. Second to Zergino in France, ran well in the Triumph last year, and then won a maiden hurdle by a street down in Tipperary. So he's a bit of a talking horse. It's very hard to know just how good he is. I mean, it was a non-event, the maiden hurdle that he won. He was miles clear from an early stage. So it'll be really interesting to see him again and see just how good he is. The rest of the field up against him, you've got a couple of nice horses. Henry de Bromhead, Sky Lord. Gordon Elliott has a couple there, Sporting Glory and Relieve the Duties, who are recent winners, but would probably, all 3 of those would need to take a step up. So I would expect one of the Mullins horses to win it. It'll be interesting to see which one Paul rides. Presumably Salvatore Mundi. He is the one that they've been talking most about. So we're gonna find out plenty about him. But either way, usually whatever wins this race turns out to be a fairly decent horse. So I would expect that to be the case again this time around.
Imagine, you don't usually say it this time of year, but the Mullins team would quite like a novice hurdler to emerge in the next few weeks at the DRF for the respective races. It's not particularly strong division for them at the moment.
Yeah, we've said that in the past, but yeah, I definitely take your point. I mean, certainly over Christmas was disappointing. He did win the Royal Bond at Fairyhouse, the Fairyhouse Winter Festival, but of course the horse he won it with, Toonsivator, is no longer a novice, so he's into the handicap category now. So yeah, Willie's novices are a bit slower than usual to emerge this year. He had a couple of high-profile ones beaten at Christmas. And while he's had plenty of maiden hurdle winners and there's plenty of potential in there yet, we do need to see something take a step forward and really put its hand up for Cheltenham. And, you know, the pecking order hasn't really been established at Closutton just yet, you know.
Domestically this weekend, we've got apparently Weatherby's chased as a slimmer than John Joe Sanderson. Well, I don't know quite to read that, but it looks like he's going to be off. They've called an inspection. Warwick's underwater. The water's receding at Kempton around the lake, but there's some cold nights to come. Are you going to make your plea now on this podcast, Scoop, for jumper bumpers car? Because I know that's what you want to see this weekend.
You've been desperate for a jumpers bumper, haven't you, all week?
Just look for something with flat forming against the bumper. It's the
thought
route to riches.
Yeah, I thought there must be a tactic in there, but yeah, please, can we have one? Please, can we have one? Here's the plea. We need a jumpers bumpers card. Where would you have it, Chelmsford?
But anywhere, don't care where, as long as there's some horses with flat forming against actual bumper horses, that's all you need. That's what the great game needs to continue to deliver. Now, we're not going to stop using the crystal ball with the weather. We're going to turn it to the year ahead, the 2025, the Sporting Life crystal ball. DC, I'll let you go first with our first category. One human to know in 2025.
Right. Let's go back to this day 12 months ago, lads. I went through, if you Google Sporting Life podcast, you can revisit them all. So I went back to this day last year, and I think we called it the Pick Six or the Six Pack or something like that. And oof. Now, I don't need to name any names here. You'll know the names, but one or two. The ones to follow flying under the Cheltenham radar last year were Firefox for the Ballymore, placed in the Supreme. No good. Sam Majest was nominated by a certain correspondent. Now, to be fair, he had no real profile, significant profile at the time. He was backed all the way down to 5-1 for the Coral Cup. No show. Let's have a look what else we had. Broadway Boy, a certain person who's on today's podcast, mentioned for the Cheltenham Festival. He didn't run. What else did we have? Just looking at my... Shannar Bob for the Albert Bartlett. I think he was a non-runner. I think he was going to run, but Henderson's stable had gone crook by then. And John Bon for the Ryanair was suggested. So last year, the bar has not been set at Sotomayor type levels. So,
Did we get one runner?
And last year, I was the Firefox person, and this year I've had a look. And honestly, God, I'm knocking people. They get so pumped about trying to pick out Cheltenham horses at this point. I've never felt more remote from trying to pick out what's going to run, let alone win at Cheltenham. But there's a topic I'm interested in, and it was touched on before by Ben, I think. Il est Français. He's in all the major chases at Cheltenham, and I'm fascinated to see where he goes. And the Gold Cup is not being mentioned. I think it should be. Now, he probably won't stay as well as Galopan, but he stays 3 miles extremely well. We know that from his runaway Coteau Star Novices chase last year. We know that he's a proper Group 1 horse, and we know that he can, make smart horses look very ordinary for a long way in good races. So I'm not saying that I have no information, but I do think we should consider the possibility that horse might come into the reckoning for the Gold Cup, especially if the field starts to thin out and one of the main hopes has some sort of setback in form or health terms. So a proper Grade 1 horse, clearly, and one who's got all sorts of Cheltenham options this year.
I think I read that they were on about coming over because they don't want to run him out in Auteuil again on soft ground throughout the winter. But I think they were talking about running him in what was the racing post chase. So, obviously they know how well Kempton 3 miles suits him. So I think that might be the next port of call, and then decisions made after that.
So Ireland might not dominate the Gold Cup, even though Britain definitely won't.
We will.
David, what's your festival name to note for 2025?
Well, like last year, trying to be a smart ass and find something that's going to turn up in the Ryanair, I've tried to do the same. And the one that I thought looked interesting at double figures is Grey Dawning. I know he's obviously one of the five British entries in the Gold Cup, but I don't think it'd take that much of a decision for Dan Skelton to think, well, you know what, we've probably not got that realistic chance of winning a Gold Cup with him, but we would have a real good chance of winning the Ryanair with him. And you know, it's there for all to see. He probably is £7 or £8 shy of Gold Cup class, but even if you're £7 or £8 shy of Gold Cup class, you can win a Ryanair, and no one will know that better than Dan Skelton, because he did that last year with exactly the same type of horse in Protectorat. So I could easily see Grey Dawning ending up in the Ryanair in March, and if he did, then that 14-1, 16-1 at the moment would look interesting.
I think that's a fair shout, and I am prepared to give him pretty much a complete pass on Kempton, because no horse who makes that real jarring first fence wild error that he made is going to run his race in the King George. So if you judge him on his previous form, then I get that completely. And we should say that although David went for John Bond in the Ryanair last year, he was very sweet on Protectorat nearer the day.
Throw enough bullets.
Really, I've got the Nichols, Skelton, Henderson strings in front of me, so I can write down the name of this horse you're going to put forward. Your festival prospect for 2025, Billy?
Sure, Fran Berry style marker pens out there, Dave. Yeah, I put one up for the Coral Cup last year, as GC kindly pointed out there. I'm possibly going to do the same again. It's a Mullins novice hurdler, but bear with me here. It's a horse that ran at the weekend, actually. Super Sunday. Ran a cracker, I thought, behind the Yellow Clay and the Lawlers of Naas. Finished second. It was his first run since May, so it's entirely possible he'll come on for it. And I just thought the way the race worked out, he was, through no fault of anybody, he possibly found himself a bit further back than ideal. Patrick was doing his best to settle him early on, and it may have affected his finishing position. He wouldn't have won, but I still think, all things considered, I thought it was a cracking effort. But interestingly, this horse has now had 5 runs over hurdles, so he is qualified for handicaps at the festival, and he's a half-brother to a very similar-sounding horse called Super Sunday, who won a Coral Cup for Jessica Harrington a couple of years ago. So I would be very interested to see if that's the route they'll go down with him. Like we said, we're not sure where the Mullins hurdlers stack up at the moment. He could easily run in a Ballymore, where he would have each-way claims, I would think, on his run at the weekend. I think better ground will suit him. But I'd be fascinated to see what sort of a mark he get in the Coral Cup, and if he turns up there, I think he'd have a real chance.
The scoop. I'm going to join Broadway Boy in the Hall of Shame.
It's so difficult, isn't it, in January? Well, I'm gonna have to go Ryanair, because it is the only bet that I've had for Cheltenham, and I've backed Jello for Venetia Williams. I thought he was much improved when we saw him at Huntingdon in the Peterborough Chase. I love the way he jumped that. They obviously beat last year's Ryanair winner Protectorat, and when you look at his Cheltenham entries, I think there's only one race for him, and we've talked in the podcast about the Ryanair cutting up. Obviously, those at the top of the betting, 5 or 6 of them aren't going to turn up. So I think Jello's definitely going to run in the Ryanair, and I think he'll run really well. And he's the only bet I've had, so I'm going to stick with him.
What price?
He's 20-1, 16-1 now.
Right.
He's gone off the radar a little bit, but I think he'll run in the Betfair Ascot Chase and possibly enhance his claims there, so he could be a shortener.
Just written it down. DJELO, Jello, got it.
Jello.
I don't think it's a Betfair Ascot Chase in Oscar. That was my own observation on the otherwise solid argument. I'm going to put
what is it, Dave?
Don't know. I don't believe Betfair sponsor Ascot now, but I might be wrong, Scoop. If I am,
Okay.
I will make sure. We've got loads of mentions on this podcast just then. Yeah, we've got loads of mentions. I'm going to put a novice hurdler of Willie Mullins's, Billy, called Final Demand. Oh, and it based a lot of what you do with Willie on the way he says things and the way he is. And this horse at Christmas came down at Limerick, I think it was.
Yeah.
He's a horse I absolutely love. He's massive. 17 hands, staying, chasing prospect. And he won an egg and spoon race, didn't he, Billy? But he won it exactly as they said he would. I think they think he's a potential A-lister. I don't think it's the Albert Bartlett. If he gets a bit more experience in him, they might miss Cheltenham altogether. But he's a big prize for the Cheltenham novices, and I think he's quite high up the close-up pecking order, in among the staying novices anyway. So, final demand was mine. I won't be contributing to the other categories we're moving on to now. I hasten to add, I only had that one ready. Well, let's move on to other categories. Ben Linfoot, I'll start with you. Give us a story to note for 2025. What's bubbling away?
What story to know? Well, how about Team GB lifting the Presbytery Cup, Billy?
Whoa.
Could it happen? Could it happen this year? Are we bouncing back?
What
Well,
was the score last year?
you have cause for optimism, but you had cause for optimism this time last year as well. So, I mean, come back to me in 6 weeks' time, Scoop.
Do you think there's more cause for optimism this year, Dave? I think this could be the story of the spring.
Could you
At the
imagine the
Cheltenham
episode
Festival.
of final fight? I mean, it's good to see Champions Full Gallop confirmed for second series last week. Could you imagine the episode? Did you and Phil Tufnell there, Scoop, on the podium with that trophy?
Yeah. Harry Cobden pouring champagne on his head from the Presbytery Cup.
What was the score last year? Anyone?
But it's quite tight in the NGC. I think it's something like no, so I think it was like 17-7. Something. We had a good Thursday, didn't we? We had a very good hour and a half on a Thursday.
The key is, I think it needs to be all over by Thursday afternoon, because it could be 7-0 Ireland on Friday. So
we're playing uphill second half. There you go. That's a good one. GC, there's loads bubbling away story-wise. What's going to be a story for you in 2025?
Well, one story I'd like to see people generally being more adventurous with the good horses, and, if you will, a few more romantic warriors. Now, a bit biased because he's a Hong Kong star, but look what that horse has done. An absolute throwback to the era of Fantastic Light and Rakti, Daylami, horses like that. He's won a string of good races in Hong Kong and winning fortunes. But rather than just clean up at home, making loads of money, they've taken him to Australia to win a Cox Plate. They've taken him to Japan to win Yasuda Kinen, and they're now taking him to Dubai for the Jebel Hatter, I think on the 28th of this month. Not only that, they're saying, after that, we're going to go for the Saudi Cup, world's richest race on dirt, and if he runs well there, we're going for the Dubai World Cup. So talk about giving it a lash, and the more a horse like that excels, the more people might get a little braver than they used to be. So that's what I'd like to see, not just for that horse, but for other people to cast the net as wide as possible.
Yeah, your story for you in 2025?
Sorry, was that me?
I'll see you. Sorry, David.
Yeah. Sorry. I guess it's the continuation of the changing of the guard on the flat, really. Obviously, Sir Michael Stout has retired this year, and obviously, I don't think Aidan O'Brien's going anywhere fast, but Charlie Appleby, the last couple of years, hasn't had the kind of horses that he has recently. And obviously, the Gosdens had a disappointing year in 2024 and hardly hit the ground running with the 2-year-olds last year. So they could be set to struggle again. And just sort of, obviously, Andrew Bolden has been there and thereabouts so many times now. And Rafe Beckett had such a good year last year and won a hatful of races with 2-year-olds. So I think he's going to be set for another year. Obviously, Carl Burke as well gets better year on year, and he's got owners really investing quite heavily in his yard, I think, this year. So just really interested to see how Carl Burke, Rafe Beckett go, and whether Andrew Bolden can continue to dominate at the Group 1 level like he has done. Not necessarily dominate, but sort of in terms of make sure that he's a regular there year on year.
That's one to you. Go on, give us a story 2025 you would like to see.
The one story that I'd like to see, Dave, and it's something that I hope we get clarity on in 2025, is the issue of the media rights issue in Ireland. I mean, this is something that's not going away. It's been kind of swept under the carpet, but the gambling bill has passed both stages of the Houses of Parliament in Ireland. It's passed the Dáil, it's passed the Seanad. I'm not sure if it's actually signed into law just yet, but it will be. So that's coming, but we're still completely in the dark as to what that means for media rights. Will we be able to see Irish racing pictures in Ireland in 2025, 2026? We don't know yet. So hopefully that's something we're going to get clarity on sooner rather than later.
basis, we could be heading towards a blankish weekend. I'm going to hold a couple of the categories back for next week in case we need them for our things for 2025. The crystal ball will be back out next week, but I'm going to end with one about the flat season. We need something to look forward to in terms of the weather, don't we? I want a horse, Billy Nash, that's going to win a Group 1 on the flat next season. And as is pointed out in the running order, you can't have Kyprios.
Again.
I'm not going to have Kyprios, but I am going to point out one that will win more than one Group 1 for the flat season in 2025, and that is the Lion in Winter.
There we go. In terms of the Irish sprinters that you've been talking about, which is the one that's going to win the Group 1s? Just so we can get it on record now, Billy, the Irish sprinting revival in 2025. What's the Group 1 winning sprinter over there?
Pen and paper at the ready there, Artie.
Yeah,
I think we could have more than one, but Gerald Lyons' horse that won the Breeders' Cup Sprint, Majestic Force, he's going to be he's a pretty decent sprinter for 2025, I think.
And Stormboy, Aussie import for Ballydoyle.
Oh yeah, forgot about him. Yeah.
Billy, let me ask you about the Lion in Winter. VC missed the Dewhurst. Did that bother you in any way, or are you happy to just trust his York form?
Oh, I'm quite happy to trust his York form. I mean, the Dewhurst was a slight setback. So, provided that is nothing more than what we're being led to believe, that it was just a small issue, then yeah, that wouldn't bother me in the slightest. I'm sure he'll be fine.
The Lion in Winter for Billy. David, you'll be looking forward to the flat season more than most, the turf flat season. Give us a surefire Group 1 winner for 2025.
Yes, I've been burning the midnight oils to come out with this one. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's called Calandagan. Obviously, he hasn't actually won a Group 1 yet, which is a rare thing for the ability that he's shown. He's got a time form rating of 129. Obviously, so good at Royal Ascot, and then ran an absolute belter in the Juddmonte International. That Champion Stakes just panned out in a real funny fashion. You know, if ever you said, show me an end of season result, then that was one of them, wasn't it? And I think there's no doubt Calandagan's a proper Group 1 horse, and I think he could win 2 or 3 in the early part of the season, and I wouldn't be surprised if he actually dominates. He sets such a good level that the 3-year-olds are going to have to be pretty special to turn him over. So I think Calandagan could be a real star for us on the flat this year.
Calandagan for GC. What's yours for 2025?
There's one. She's already snagged one Group 1, but I think she can maybe win one or more this year. It's a Gosden filly called Friendly Soul, who really came good in the second half of last season. She won at Ascot, and then she won 2 races in France, 1 on Arc Weekend. It wasn't thunderous in its style, but she's a really, really good-looking filly, very progressive filly. And her pedigree, related to horses like Call the Wind and We Are, etc., suggests that she should get better from 3 to 4. So I hope they've not shipped her off to America. She runs in the Strawbridge colours, and she'd win a fortune in those fillies turf races in the States. But if she's still in Europe, I could see her going really well and maybe building towards something like the National Stakes of Glorious Goodwood.
That's again, last but not least, Scoop. A Group 1 winner in 2025 is going to be...
It's going to be a big year for Wootton Bassett. You look at those colts Aidan O'Brien's got, Henri Matisse and Camille Pizarro, and I like the look of this Twain, who achieved an awful lot in the space of a week at the back end of his 2-year-old career, winning by 6 lengths at 28-1 on debut at Leopardstown, and then winning the Group 1 at Saint-Cloud over a mile 8 days later. Really impressed with him and the way he went about his business. I'm not sure what his trip's going to be as a 3-year-old. Maybe it'll be 10 furlongs, but whatever it is, I'm sure he looks like a top-class horse to me. Twain.
What's he called then?
Twain.
Oh, Twain, yeah, I remember him, yeah.
And this podcast will be available in 12 months' time. We can go back and look back on the successes, not both of the jumpers and flat horses we put forward to follow. There, time has beaten us. Thanks to Ben, to GC, to DJ, Billy, and Daryl, of course. Thank you for listening. And we'll be back next week, hopefully looking at some good action at the Winter's Millions fixture. I think it's Haydock as well, this guy bet Peter Marsh. Plenty to get our teeth stuck into. Fingers crossed we might see some turf racing this weekend too.
Download the Sporting Life app for the best racing coverage, including live racing blogs, fast results, stable tours, trainer and jockey interviews, expert opinion, and tips.